The saint that we are feasting on this day, actually right throughout the church, is someone of importance in the history of the East, but also unexpectedly of the West. There is a saying, Athanasius contra mundum, Athanasius against the world. There was a danger that the whole world would, as somebody of the period commented, wake up and yawn to find itself Aryan. It was all to do with one tiny stroke, the smallest letter in the alphabet, iota. It looks like a comma. And if it's put in the word homoousios, which had been defined and given by the Holy Spirit, therefore, to the Church, and come back to us in recent times in its original form in Latin, consubstantial, if one adds that little stroke, it becomes of similar substance. And that was a formula wanted by the emperor to calm things down. This man stood out, an example of what we perhaps need to do at times. It is right now tempting to keep the peace at all costs. And that's precisely how those who, unfortunately, often within the structure, manage to carry on damaging that structure. No one raises a voice, because they might seem like Athanasius against the world. But one man with God is a majority. And if we are aware of certain issues, we need to do what depends on us, and not to abdicate. I would like to attack 2 points this morning. It is the month of May, and I would like to look for a few moments at the question of the Rosary. It has come out under exorcism that at all costs the underworld wants to get this instrument out of the little people's hands. He does not like this instrument one little bit. If one comes into an exorcism with a blessed rosary, it creates havoc. There is immediate commotion from underneath. Just the instrument, let alone the prayers that go with it. It has come out in exorcism that this is a very, very powerful weapon against the underworld. Now, it is still there in the life of the church, but do you see how the devil is keen on making it quite innocuous? Observe how the average rosary in Ireland takes place. Usually, it is more or less each one doing his own thing. Very rarely do you find a rosary said with any kind of harmony in Ireland. The favourite trick is to come in before the end of the first part. What happens there? The holy name disappears, it's not heard. Who gains by that? Also, one is a source of irritation to the person next to one for the whole of that rosary, and the attention of that good person is deflected forcefully from both Jesus and Mary to the person who is commanding attention by being the locomotive and pulling along this rosary, which has already taken far too long. It's exactly like the Grand National. The important thing is getting to the finishing post. How much prayer has happened in the meantime? If you don't believe what I'm saying, go around some of a few of the rosaries happening now and again still in our churches in Ireland. One wonders whether one has copped on that prayer is not prayer unless the heart is engaged. So, neutralize if it's there. That's what Old Nick does. The other is the Blessed Sacrament. In that same series of exorcisms, Annalise and Miguel, there are a series of very frightening revelations, coming, yes, from down under pressure and duress, obliged to obey Christ the High Priest in The Exorcist. And it is quite clear that precisely all these things which have now become norms, but after the council, and therefore without the protection of the same Holy Spirit that was keeping us safe when all the bishops are together, this was also a means of neutralizing the effect of grace, and also of taking away faith in the real presence. Because in practice, right now, 50 years after the council, we are in a situation where, proportionately, it seems, most people no longer really believe. It starts with the children. A child needs signs, and if those signs are contradictory, he will believe what he sees and not what actually is invisible, because there is no visibility of the invisible for a child except what he sees. He's no genius. He believes that anything which can be touched by anyone is anything at all. And therefore, they are the church of tomorrow, and Old Nick knows it perfectly well. Also, make sure that if they do receive Holy Communion, they are not receiving the benefit from it. It is a great pleasure to the underworld to see souls, black and dark, coming to Holy Communion. It adds to the hardness of heart. So do you see? Neutralize, neutralize, neutralize if you can't stop altogether. The third issue is this, linked with the other two. Make sure that the rosary is not said in the family. The most powerful way of eliminating it is to make sure that the image of the beast reigns at the moment when before the family would have been together. It's very difficult to turn off an interesting program. And what happens in that process is this. The devil then has possession of the airwaves in the average family, not just in Ireland, but throughout the world, at least the civilized world by now. And therefore he has made it impossible for souls to be touched by grace directly, because grace is so delicate that without silence and the cushion of interiority, it cannot get through. Compare this with a century ago, when marching to eternity were very large numbers of young people. 100 years ago was declared what became the Great War. But we have many testimonies that the war actually was a great mission field also. Indeed, one army chaplain said this: "It is the greatest mission. One German cannon does more than all the missionaries put together." In other words, put any human being before an ultimatum and he will perhaps save his soul, which perhaps in front of the television he would not even have thought about. Which brings me to the end of the gospel itself. Fear not him who can destroy the body, but after that there is nothing more he can do. Fear him rather who, after the body has gone, can destroy also the soul in Gehenna. And this was precisely what, for instance, those chaplains knew when they ran in full fire from trench to trench to anoint and absolve these soldiers who were crying out in agony for Father. And I am sure that many were saved under fire who would perhaps never have even thought of eternity when they had plenty of time to waste. In that context, just listen to this testimony, which perhaps says it all. It is actually one linked with ourselves. It was a certain Father Gwyn of the Society of Jesus. Before the war, he had been stationed in Dublin, and when he volunteered for active service, he was appointed as chaplain to the Irish Guards. More than one of the war correspondents has described how, before going forward in a charge, the Irish Guards would kneel for a few moments in prayer. There's a wonderful picture of that in the Anglican Cathedral in Belfast, St. Anne's. It was Father Gwyn who introduced the custom, and they knelt for his absolution. He was wounded in the attack on the brick fields near La Bassée on the 1st of February 1915. The wound was not serious, and in half an hour he had had it dressed and was back among his men. Testimony from one of the Irish Guards themselves. I saw him just before he died. Shrapnel and bullets were being showered upon us in all directions. Hundreds of our lads dropped. Father Gwyn was undismayed. He seemed to be all over the place, trying to give the last sacraments to the dying. Once I thought he was burned alive, for a shell exploded within a few yards of where he was. And the next moment I saw nothing but a great heap of earth. The plight of the wounded concealed beneath all that was harrowing. Out of the ground came cries of, "Father! Father! Father!" from those who were in their death agonies. Then, as if by a miracle, Father Gwyn was seen to fight his way through the earth. He must have been severely injured, but he went on blessing the wounded and hearing their confessions. The last I saw of him was kneeling by the side of a German soldier.